Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
I'm short. My name is Suzy and I am an alcoholic. Hi, y'all. My sobriety date's March 27th, 1979, and I am very grateful for that. It's real good to be here. I was sitting up there thinking before we started about Alcoholics Anonymous, period. I think I get a little bit of it every time that I go to a meeting, but especially when I go to a convention and see so many of us sitting around drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and not drinking booze. You know, we're sober and we're clean, and coming to a convention is always real emotional for me. People who know me will tell you most things are really emotional for me. But it's, I am just a little bit emotional, but this is, in New Jersey is especially emotional for me because that's where my sponsor lives. And while I've kept her as a sponsor for the last 7 years, with her being in New Jersey and me being in Memphis and Scottsdale and Denver and God only knows where else, we've managed to stay in contact because she knows me better than anybody else. And I guess probably the best way for me to start out, because I think my story is really a love story more than anything else. It's what Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me more of anything is about love. And that started with her. She is incidentally on for Sunday as a speaker and is not going to be here. And the reason why she's not going to be here is because she's really very ill. So I would appreciate, and I know she would appreciate, prayers from you for her recovery, because they work. It was prayers that got me in here, and it's prayers that kept me in here, and prayers that have kept me sober. They really do work. I didn't come in here feeling like prayers worked, and I didn't come in here feeling like I wanted to be here either. The first convention I went to, I wasn't particularly emotional about how wonderful it was to be around a bunch of sober alcoholics. I was not real happy to be in AA. I got here via the Memphis court system. They somewhere along the way decided that I was a nuisance to society and they were going to take me out of society. And, which, it was fine with me. I was so full of self-pity at the time and so arrogant that, the thought of being put in jail for a long time, to where I could get out and really have some good war stories was really kind of appealing to me. Well, I ran around with people that had been in jail, and I was the only one that had been in jail, like, overnight and stuff like that, and never really done any good time, So I thought that it would be kind of neat, there was a real part of me that thought that was kind of exciting. And, the way that I got in, I started drinking when I was 15 years old, and I started drinking for God only knows what reasons. The ones that I remember was that I wanted to belong. It never occurred to me that I might try and belong to a crowd that didn't drink. That I might try and belong to a crowd that didn't get in trouble. I wanted to belong to the fast crowd. And I really didn't. The reason why I felt out of place when I came into AA and felt like I didn't belong anywhere is because I didn't. I didn't because I didn't allow myself to. Anytime that anybody started to get close to me, I backed off because I couldn't handle it. Now, I'm sure somewhere along the way, if I traced it back, it had something to do with my childhood and my upbringing and the fact that my parents were both alcoholic and that there was violence in the house and all the other stuff. But I've never really spent a lot of time trying to figure out whose fault it was. One of the first things that I learned in AA was that you can quit blaming. You can quit blaming and stop trying to figure it out. Somebody can tell you a million times where and when, but what are you going to do to change it? I remember the first time that I told my sponsor my horrible story about my childhood, and God knows I was mistreated as a child, and I was the only one that had ever been mistreated. And I made it a point to let her know that I was the only one that, and I lied, my childhood was enough. What really happened was enough, but I didn't want to stop there. I gave her the biggest sob story, and I thought I finally got her. She had that look in her eyes like, bless her heart, and I thought, finally, I finally have gotten this woman's attention about why I'm the way that I am. There really is a reason for why I'm the way that I am, and she looked at me and she said, well, you're absolutely right. You did have a really rough childhood, and unfortunately, there's a lot of that goes on, and it is unfortunate, and it is sad. And I'm really sorry to hear it because I don't like to know that anybody's hurt. But just because you were put on the potty backwards when you were 3 doesn't mean you can't turn your little butt around. And it was like a slap in the face to me. I thought, wait a minute, what is wrong with this picture? Maybe we should start over again and let me embellish a little bit more. And I remember that, it was somewhere in the first year of my sobriety that she told me that. I always felt sorry for myself, and I always thought that the whole world revolved around me. It never occurred to me that my parents were unhappy. It never occurred to me that maybe they were having a hard time. Nothing ever occurred to me about anything except in relation to myself. And I lived that way up until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and for a while after I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, that the whole world revolved around me. And I drank because I didn't like the way life was. I drank because I wanted to belong in a place that I didn't belong, and I drank to forget things. The first time that I ever drank should have been my first clue that there was going to be problems. I drank in a horse pasture at a horse show in Memphis, Tennessee, back with my friends, and I drank, I don't even know what booze comes in now. It was a big thing of wine, okay? Fifth, I don't know. Anyway, it's Booze Farm Strawberry Hill, I remember that. Good wine. I started out with good wine and worked my way down. And I drank the whole thing, and I wasn't drunk. And, it's difficult to decide, make the big decision that you're going to drink so that you belong, and then you look around and other people are drunk and you're not. So I did what I did best, and I pretended that I was drunk. I pretended so well I have a scar on my leg to remind me of it when I fell into someone's coffee table. And I woke up with a little bit of a headache, but I really didn't have a hangover, and I didn't understand what the big deal was about drinking, so I tried it again, and again, and again. And it was somewhere when I was about 19 years old that I thought about the time of when I had faked being drunk and realized that what I was doing at 19 was faking being sober because I drank all the time. And not because I wanted to, but because I had to. It stopped being, ever since I picked up a drink, I drank to get drunk. I didn't know what a social drink was. I still don't know what a social drink is. I think it's a total waste of time to have 2 drinks. And it's a waste of booze. I have never understood people letting their ice melt in their drink. It's like, why are you doing this? Why are you even here? And I remember sitting in like happy hour. 2 for $1, and someone would come in and drink 1. And I was like, you can have another one. It's free. Have several. It's okay. And they would talk about doing responsible things like go home and cut the grass, or the wife has dinner on table. And I was like, so? It'll be there somewhere on the floor, in the fridge, somewhere, but, drink. Stay a while, drink. Or don't bother. Don't waste what I could be drinking, and that's exactly how I felt. I started drinking in bars when I was real young. I liked bars. I liked them because they were dark, and they were musty, and they were smoky, and they had lots of booze, and they had lots of men. Now, I made it a point to go to bars that had lots of men, and I made it a point to go to bars that there were very few women, because I didn't like competition. And I found out what men were put on this earth for real early in life. And that was to buy me drinks. they performed beautifully, you know. And in all honesty, I started out charming. I mean, I did. I was charming even when I was drunk. You know, I had charm down. I had to have charm down. I quickly lost charm and was kicked out of a lot of real sleazy bars from people that didn't think I was very cute or charming. And I was confused. You know, I thought, I'm drinking with all these sleazy people here anyway, you know, and they're kicking me out. Well, it's obviously because I'm above these people. And they can't handle it. So I'll leave. You know, one of the main reasons why I got kicked out is because I'm not particularly thrilled with being hurt, but I love to see other people get hurt. It was real exciting to me you know, I went in, we're talking Tennessee redneck here, okay? We're talking everything you've ever thought about Tennessee was true where I went, okay? And I liked it, you know, I liked dodging bullets, you know, and beer bottles, and I liked the sound of broken glass, you know, somebody getting cracked over the head with a beer bottle, and you know, I liked seeing shiny little knives come out and everything. It was really exciting to me. You know how you get that rush of adrenaline go over? There can be a fight clear on the other side, but you know it because the electricity's come through. And I got off on that. You know, it was really exciting. But I didn't want to participate in it. So I would instigate it. You know, it was easy, you know, because they were just sitting waiting. All you had to do was give them an excuse, you know. So I made up things or told the truth, whatever served the purpose, and would get things riled up. Well, that, you know, the bar people, you know, that were working there, managers and stuff, started realizing that maybe I was the cause of this, you know. But of course, by the time police arrived and everything, I was gone, you know. So they invited me not to come back anymore. And so I moved around a lot. I drank pretty much. I drank with other people, but I always went by myself. I always drove myself, and, you know, because I like to be able to leave any time that I want to leave. Now, because I was starting fights, it was probably a good idea because you can't hang around and ask your friend, hey, now, go, let's go, you know, because the timing's off, you know. And quite frankly, I didn't have time to fool with other people, you know. It was like, leave me alone. So I moved around. It's hard to, you know, hit a moving target, and I moved around a lot, and there was one bar that let me continue to come in there, but they limited the number of drinks that I could have while I was in their bar. And I thought, you know, there was a part of me that thought that was really sweet. You know, I thought, this guy really cares about me. You know, he really doesn't want to see me throwing up on myself, you know, with mascara hanging down to my chin, and I think that's really sweet. So I drank 2 six-packs before I got there, so that I could, you know, let him know how much I appreciated him watching my drinking for me, you know. And I always prided myself. This is probably the funniest thing that I ever did, to me anyway. That I always prided myself. I never did any drugs. I mean, I smoked marijuana, but I didn't like it. And I never took the first drug. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm a drug addict, but I just never took the first drug. And I really thought that I was something because I did what was legal, you know, and I didn't get involved in hardcore drugs. And, of course, driving drunk is not legal, I found out. But it wasn't the same, you know. There's different degrees of illegal, I guess. The junkies that I hung around with were the ones that picked me up off the bar floor and took me home. You know, the junkies were the ones that would say to me, Sue, I think you might have a drinking problem. You know, it was, I went to the bars, the sleazy bars, because I felt like I was above people, and I was, you know how when you're in a bar and you're thinking, if I ever get as bad as so-and-so down at the end of the bar, I'll quit drinking. I was so-and-so down at the end of the bar. And they told me that, you know, they were like, gosh, I'm glad that I don't drink like you, you know. I picked a bar that had a laundromat next to it because if I was going to do my laundry, which was not very often, I was going to do it while I drank. I lost a lot of clothes. People ripped me off a lot when I was drinking. You know, my dad suggested to me one time that perhaps I left things, you know, and left them for people to take from me, and I said, no, you know, they ripped me off. I'm a victim. A professional victim. You know, it didn't matter what was going on in my life. I found a way to make it not work. You know, and I did it when I got into the program. In fact, it was my sponsor that, you know, named me that. She said, you know, you really are a professional victim. You know, I couldn't get a job because I didn't have any gas in my car because I didn't have any money. You know, which made perfectly good sense to me. And she said, walk. And I said, I can't. And she said, why? And I said, because it's hot. And she said, what does that have to do with anything? And I said, it's hot, it's humid. By the time I get there, I'll look horrible and they won't hire me anyway. You know, and she said, okay, take a bus. And I said, I can't. I don't have any money. And she said, borrow it. And I said, I can't. And she said, why? And I said, because you told me not to use people. And I mean, you know, it's like she said, forget it, starve. You know, die in the street. That was after I'd been sober for a while. That was not even when I was still drinking. So I had gotten down while I was drinking. I had gotten down professional victim real well. The way that I got here, you know, there were a lot of things that should have gotten me into AA. I was never any more ready than at 18 years old. I had horrendous blackouts. I mean, for not just hours, for days. I can't, other than to tell you that I got arrested when I was 19 and to remember a bar that I went to in Memphis. I don't remember a whole lot about the year that I was 19 because I drank around the clock. And that was all that I knew. It was all that I knew, and it was all that I knew how to do. And I suspected for a long time that I was an alcoholic, but I didn't really think that AA was an option because I didn't think that it would work, and I didn't want to try. You know, it wasn't an option for me because I didn't particularly want to stop drinking. I wasn't real thrilled about hurting, but I knew how to do it. You know, I knew how to hurt, and I knew how to do that, and I just always suspected that I was just going to die drunk. And it was okay with me after a while. You know, it was perfectly okay with me. Because I did things when I was drinking, and you know, I think God gives us blackouts as a way to keep us from blowing our brains out. People started telling me when I first started blacking out, they started telling me these things that I had done when I was blacked out, and I, you know, soon learned you don't ask. You know, you don't ask because you really don't want to know. And when they start telling you, you tell them you don't want to know. You know, that I'm glad my mind shut off to that because, it horrifies me of the things that I do remember. You know, and I suspect they're a lot worse when I don't remember them. And I really have come to believe that is, you know, God's way of saving me because I felt so much guilt and so much remorse for the things that I had done to other people and the things that they did to me. You know, I lost all self-respect out there. I couldn't hold my head up. I didn't have any idea what respect meant, not to another person and not to myself. And it wasn't because I wasn't taught that. It wasn't because I didn't have it at some time. It was that alcohol robbed it from me. And I let it. I let it because that was what I knew. And, you know, what it says in the big book about that, you know, you drink to make these things possible because there's things that you just can't do when you're sober. So you drink to make the things possible, and then you feel so bad about having done them that you drink more to cover up for having done them. And then as a result of it, you do it again because you're drunk again. So the way that I woke up was, I've got to have a drink because I've got to kill the pain. And, you know, I walked out and I acted really cool because I hung around with really cool people, you know, that you don't walk up to a biker and ask him, could you hold me? I'm scared. You know, they're not much interested in that. So I couldn't let anybody know that I was scared. And the way that scared manifested itself in me was that I got real belligerent. You know, I got extremely violent, and when I first got into treatment, we were sitting around in groups one time talking about, you know, these women were talking about being in relationships where they were abused. And I, for once, had nothing to say. And everyone got a little suspicious when I was quiet. And they asked me, you know, why are you so quiet? And I said, because I don't think that I was ever really abused. I think that I was the one that did the abusing. And I picked weak men, and I physically abused them, and I emotionally abused them, and I physically and I emotionally abused my own mother because I didn't know any other way. You know, I didn't know what to do with this thing that was going on inside of me. I had turned into this monster that I didn't know what to do with, and the only way that I could drown out any of it was with the alcohol. So I had to keep the constant flow of alcohol in me. I had gone into DTs, and that was one of the most frightening things that had ever happened to me. I was hallucinating. That was not particularly frightening to me because I didn't know. I found out 5 years after I'd been sober that I had been hallucinating, and I had no idea. You know, I really thought that there was a kangaroo standing at the light in Memphis, Tennessee, you know. I thought it was a little strange at the time, and I thought it was a little strange after being sober for 5 years, but I really did think that it was there, you know, so that was not particularly frightening to me. What was frightening to me is that, you know, in DTs people die, and what I would do was drive, you know, because I had to get away from it, and I kept running and running and running, physically running and running through the alcohol to get away from me and to get away from what was going on inside of me. I woke up in alcoholic paralysis one time that I could not move. The only thing I could do was move my head over to throw up on the side of the bed. And I told the guy that I was living with at the time, go get me some beer. And he said, why don't you eat something? I said, because I don't want to eat anything. I mean, God. You know, I mean, you're laying there half dead and they want to feed me? You know, and he started cooking bacon. You know, it's like, get out of here, go get some beer. And he said, it's Sunday. I said, what does that have to do with anything? And he said, the stores don't open to where I can get beer until noon. And I said, the stores are open. He said, they're open, but I can't buy beer. And I said, steal it. You know, I don't let him go to jail. I don't care. Just drop off the booze on the way down there. You know, I'm not particularly concerned with you, Dennis. Just get me some beer. And he did. I don't know how he got it. I didn't ask. I didn't care. And he brought it back and you know, put it on the nightstand beside me. And I said, you know, this is not going to work. You're going to have to give it to me. And I was, you know, one of the most humiliated times of my entire life. You know, I said, I can't even pick it up. I have to have it. And he put the bottle to my mouth, and I just clamped my teeth over it, and he just poured it down my throat until, you know, I mean, I kept throwing it back up, and I kept saying, just keep doing it, because I knew eventually some would stay down long enough for me to just get up and function. Now, you know, the I guess normal, whatever that is, the normal thing to do would be to thank this man who probably saved my life, but what I did was got up and smacked him. Because I had to pick a fight with him because I had to go out and get drunk. You know, so I, you know, took the car keys and I left. And I remember writing him a letter one time because I really felt bad every time that I did this stuff. I mean, I embarrassed him in front of his friends. You know, I got arrested one night for trying to beat him up in a bar. And I embarrassed him and I humiliated him. And I, you know, I understand he let me do it. I'm not into the big guilt anymore that, my God, I've destroyed this guy's life. You know, I mean, but I did that. You know, I mean, I really did abuse him, and I embarrassed him, and I humiliated him. I was scared. You know, I was scared, and that's why I did what I did. You know, I didn't know where to turn, and when I wrote him that letter, and I told him, you know, I'm really sorry. I really am sorry, and I know you keep trying to help me, but you can't help me. There's not anybody here that can help me. And I think that was probably the first time that I thought about God, but I quickly got rid of that because I had done some real offensive things to what I believed to be real offensive things to God, and I really didn't think He wanted to have anything to do with me. And I couldn't stand rejection, so I just didn't bother. And quite frankly, God didn't fit into it. You know, I mean, it was like you get God and you have to go sell Bibles, you know, out on the street corner, and I had to drink. I didn't have time to sell Bibles. And I believed He might make me well. And the last thing I wanted was to be well. You know, I knew how to do sick. I did sick very well. I didn't know how to do well. And that scared me more. You know, the prospect of dying drunk was a lot more appealing to me than living sober. So when I got the last time that I got arrested and I got another DWI, I had time to sit back in the back of that cop car while they tore my car to pieces looking for drugs, I guess. I'm not sure. I registered a .28. And the cop looked at me and said, do you know that a 4-0's dead? And I said, yeah, and I'm working on it. And I meant it with everything inside of me. You know, I didn't want to take a handful of pills because I didn't like drug addicts. Okay? And I didn't want to slit my wrist because I didn't like pain. You know, but I wanted to drink until I passed out and never wake back up. And I sat in the back of that cop car, you know, and I thought about, oh my God, I'm 21 years old. I'm 21 years old, and I'm about to go to jail for a year because I'd already been told at that point you get arrested again and you go to jail for a year. And there was a part of me that, you know, there was a big tug of war that went on inside of me. There was a part of me that was saying, you know, Suzy, you really aren't this way. You know, there really is something else out there for you, and there really is hope. But there was a lot bigger part that was saying, forget it and go to jail. It'll give you some good stories. You know, it's no big deal. You know, it's no big deal to go hug a commode in a sleazy bar and throw up blood and wash your mouth off and put that grin on your face and walk back out there and say, let's drink. You know, let's start doing some drinking here. You know, it's real glamorous to wake up in the morning after having a party at your house and drinking beer that had cigarette butts in the bottom of it. And if you don't shake badly enough, then you don't get the ashes in your mouth. And you get enough just to get out and get in the car and be able to go get some more in whatever way you had to do to get it, and I didn't care. You know, and I had time to think about that while I was in jail. And I wouldn't call anybody to come and get me out because I didn't deserve to have anyone come and get me out. You know, that's called self-pity and BS. I got over that. I did call somebody, and she came and got me, and through a series of events, it happened that the person I called was my best friend. She also worked for DWI probation. And she got me in touch with a lawyer who told me that after going through several lawyers who wouldn't take my case because lawyers like to win, I found one that was new enough to where he just wanted money, you know, and lots of it, but that's okay, I had Dennis, you know, and if he didn't come up with the money, I'd beat him up. And he did come up with the money. And what the lawyer gave me was the best advice. I think he probably deserved more money than he got. He told me what I needed to do was go to a place called Grace House and talk to those people. And he said, and I don't mean stop by and get you, you know, I mean, I went and saw this lawyer after being in jail for a while, and I hadn't bathed in months. I had stopped bathing a long time ago because people were out to get me. And when you're in the shower and you have no clothes on, you're real vulnerable. You know? And I mean, what's the best time in the world to have somebody come and get you is when you're in the shower with no clothes on and all soaked up and, you know, soap in your eyes and the whole bit, so I didn't do it. And I quit brushing my teeth because the drug addicts were going to put acid on my toothbrush. You know, the drug addicts I knew weren't about to give away their acid. You know? But that did not occur to me at the time, so I stopped brushing my teeth. Besides that, it was a real inconvenience. So I walked in there, and I had hair down to my waist that, you know, stuck out all over the place. I had red eyes, and I was cute. Okay? Depending on whose mirror you were looking in. Okay? In my mirror, I was really cute. And the guy told me, you know, I think what you need to do is you need to go into treatment. And I said, why? And he said, well, because I think that maybe what your problem is that you just might have a drinking problem. And if you don't, what can it hurt? And I said, oh, I definitely have a drinking problem. What does that have to do with anything? And he said, why don't you just go and talk to these people? And I did. And I went and talked to a lady named Ro, who was the counselor there, and I talked to her for a while, and I told her I'd come back the next day and check in, and I looked up at her, and she had tears in her eyes. And I couldn't figure out why this woman who didn't know me from Adam's house cat had tears in her eyes, you know, and I thought, you know, maybe I should comfort her. I didn't really know how, but, you know, I was really, really very confused about that. It was later cleared up for me, but basically what it was is that she told me that a lot of people say they'll come back, and they don't. And she was afraid I was going to die if I didn't come back. For God, that I walked back in there the next day. I went and I told my mom that had to have felt like Lois, you know, when Bill would come in and say, I'm going to take the cure. You know, that she had that look like, God, I hope she really gets it this time, and then that look like I don't dare dream that she will because I can't stand the disappointment again. And I said, well, I'm going to go into treatment and they're going to teach me how to drink. I was in for a big surprise, They had told me that I was going to have to be abstinent when I went into this place, that, I couldn't drink and I couldn't drug, I couldn't do anything. And that was not, of course you pick jail over that. You can drink and you can drug in jail. And I was scared. I was afraid that I was going to go into DTs again, and I was scared that I wasn't going to make it. But, I heard a speaker a long time ago that I've never forgotten this. He said that no matter how far down any one of us go, there's a little spark of decency left inside of all of us, and no amount of alcohol and no drugs and no amount of pain can ever take away that little spark of decency. And I think that it was that little spark of decency that was inside of me that got me back. And I think today what that little spark of decency is God. You can't drown God, and you can't beat him away, and you can't wish him away, and, you can't drug him away. You can't do anything. He's there. And he's bigger than I am. And I walked in the door the next day, and it was the first time that I met the lady who was the director of the house and who later became my sponsor. And she asked me all the regular questions that they ask you, when you go into treatment, like how much you drink, and you give the regular answers like, not much. And, do you have blackouts? And you say, how would I know? I'm usually in a blackout, and I was cute. I was disgustingly cute. And she kept asking me the questions, and I kept lying, and she kept knowing that I was lying, and she kept asking the questions, so I kept lying, and I kept knowing she knew that I was lying. And then she finally just flipped her pencil down on the table, and said, I want you to answer me something, Susan. And I thought, oh, God, here we go again. And she said, when's your last drink? And I said, yesterday. And she said to me, Susie, I want you to remember the date, March 27th, 1979. And I said, why? And she said, because that's going to be your sobriety date. You never have to take another drink as long as you live. And there was that little bitty part inside of me that said, God, I hope she's right. Because I can't take any more. And there was that bigger part of me that was saying, she doesn't understand where I've been. She doesn't understand why I have to drink the way that I have to drink, and I can't do this. And she said, and you're going to do it the same way that I did it. You're going to do it 24 hours at a time, one day at a time. And I said, I think I'm going to have to do it 1 hour at a time. And she said, I think you're probably right. She said, I've done it one day at a time since October 23rd, 1957. And not being much of a mathematical whiz, I would not have been able to calculate, except for that I was born in 1957, so I knew she was talking 21 years without a drink, and immediately I thought she must do drugs. That's the option. You can do drugs. And as if she read my mind, she said, or a mood-altering drug. And I thought, oh, my God, and she reads minds, too. I've come to find out that's true. She probably does read minds, but it really wasn't that hard to read me. I'm not a unique drunk. And everything that I was thinking that I felt for the first time and that nobody else had ever felt in their entire life, everyone has felt, and she had heard for 21 years, and she had felt, too. And that little spark of decency won out. She set me out there to eat, which was not real thrilling to me. I had not eaten in a long time because they were going to drug my food. And it was inconvenient. Everybody knows that if you eat and drink, it's going to take longer to get drunk, so don't eat. And they taught me how to eat, and they taught me how to drink tea and orange juice with brown sugar. And I'm real grateful that I'm glad that all these other programs that are out now that may or may not work, I don't know. I'm just grateful to God they weren't there when I got there, because I didn't need to hear about adult children of alcoholics. I didn't need to hear about codependency. I didn't need to hear about anything except for how am I not going to throw my toenails up in 2 seconds? And how am I going to stop shaking long enough to be able to make it through this, even understand any of this stuff? I had conversations with people for the first 30 days that I didn't ever remember. And I hadn't even had a drink. And I was scared. And all I wanted to know was, how, you know, if I've got to do this, you know, and always the prospect of going to jail was always hanging over my head. And after sobering a bit, I didn't particularly care about being in with big women in jail, you know, that might not think I was cute or charming. And that perhaps the women I was in treatment with were going to be a little bit nicer to me since they wanted to hug me. I wasn't real thrilled with that either. I don't think that it was by mistake that the place that I ended up in for treatment was called Grace House. And I don't think it was by mistake that it was named that, and I don't think it's by mistake that I ended up there, and I don't think it was by mistake that Pat ended up in my life. You know, what happened to me was that Pat taught me, and why I say that my story is more of a love story than anything else, is that she taught me how to love. Not just to love other people, but how to love myself, and the way that she taught me was through example. Now, that's not to say that there weren't times that she didn't just sit there and just really sock it to me about how things really were in my life. But the part that I didn't know about at the time that I found out later was that every time that she would tell me a bunch of these truths that were so painful to me that she was scared to death that I was going to leave, and if I left, I didn't have a friend out there in the streets anymore. If I left, I was going to drink and I was going to die. And what she did, every time that she did that, when I went slamming out of her office, is that she dropped on her knees and she prayed to God that I would make it through that day and not leave. And she went to court for me and laid her reputation on the line as an alcohol and drug counselor to tell that judge, just let me have one shot at her. She's going to keep her in here another 30 days. If it doesn't work out, then put her in jail, but I really think she can be salvaged. And this was against everybody else saying, no, she can't, including the judge. You know, what that is what it talks about in the 12 and 12 about letting God channel through you. And what she did was let God channel through her. And she went before that judge and she asked him to give me another chance, and he did. And she loved me. She loved me into wellness. She loved me until I got to a point where I could love myself, and she believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. You know, there's new people that come in that they sit around and they think, you know, they go home and they tell their husband or their wife or mom or dad or whatever, you know, I don't know what it is that they've got, and I'm not real sure that I want to go out, but there's something there. You know, there's something there, and I can't describe it, but there's just something there. And what I've come to believe that something is that it's God working through all of us, and it's a lot of love. You know, I wanted to know that God was, I wanted him to be tangible. I wanted to see him. I wanted to touch him. I wanted to know what color eyes he had. And if I couldn't have that, then I'd really, you know, I mean, I was scared. You know, what Pat taught me was about a loving God, and where she got that loving God was from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I found out that God is inside of me. And if God is inside of me, then God must be inside of all of y'all. And if I want to touch God, all I got to do is go to an AA meeting and hug one of you. And if I want to know what color eyes God has, he has whatever color eyes is of the person that I'm hugging. And it works. You know, other people prayed me in here, and other people prayed me sober. The grace of God kept me sober through some things that when I was told not to do it, I did it because I was different. You know, the rules are different for me. The rules aren't different for me. Now, the steps are given to us for a reason. The steps are given to us because they're supposed to teach us how to live. You know, that was my big problem when I came in. I didn't know how to live. You know, you want me to try and function on a day-to-day basis without booze, and I don't even know how to live? Yeah. And start by taking step 1, and then work your way down to 12. And it was when I did sober, something far worse than I had ever done drinking, that I took the third step. And that, in fact, Pat's husband, Mike, was the one that told me. I kept saying, well, you know, I think about taking this decision, you know, and doing all that crap that you do with it. And he said, it just says you make a decision. And I made the decision on that day that I did that I don't live this way anymore. I don't want to be miserable and be sober, and I don't want to drink. You know, the last thing I wanted to do was drink. I had gotten over the fact that I was 21 and could never drink again, and had gotten to the fact that I was 21 and I didn't have to. and that all I had to do was take the steps and make the decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God and then back it up. You know, there's a reason why the remaining steps are there, and it was in the fourth step that I found out why I did the things that I did. I found out about me, and I stopped blaming other people, and I stopped thinking that, well, if this would change or this would change, and I stopped using people. I stopped taking advantage of situations, and I started depending on God. And for a lot of the time, it was not my God, it was Pat's God, but it worked. And it was a lot of times not God, it was Pat. But she always made it very clear to me that whatever I saw in her was God. And that if I wanted what she had, I needed to do what she had done, and that was worth the 12 steps. And tell everything to somebody in the 6th step. And ask to have the character defects removed. Make amends for what it was that I had done, and not any of this I'm sorry Dennis stuff. You know, Dennis told me one time, Suzy, I'm so tired of hearing I'm sorry from you. I don't care that you're sorry. And you're absolutely right, you are sorry. But you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that is not an amend. You want to make an amend, say you're sorry and you stop it. I'm real grateful for 10, 11, and 12. I've grown in my relationship with God because in the 10th step I can continue to move out of the way the things that stand in the way of me and you. The reason why AA works is because we do reach out to the other person, and I take it real seriously that I am responsible today. You know, not to say on that one time that somebody walks into a club room, let somebody else do it. I'm hungry. You know, I'm grateful to God that Pat wasn't hungry to where she couldn't help me that day and all the other days that she helped me. You know, it tries to teach us in Alcoholics Anonymous how to be less selfish. And it's a real battle for me. But the selfishness has to get out of the way, the ego has to get out of the way, the pride has to get out of the way. And all the other character defects have to move out of the way because that's the way God channels himself, and that's the reason why I stay sober. You know, the person that I work with may or may not stay sober, and that's not any of my business. But I give to them whether I think they're going to make it or not. I give to them the same thing that I would give to the person that I'm not sure, you know, that I am sure is going to make it. And who am I to judge? You know, I reach out and I try and love everybody that comes in. I can't make any judgments about who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. The Big Book gives me a guide on when I'm supposed to stop trying to work with a newcomer. If they're not willing to accept it, I move on. There's plenty of people out there that do want what I've got. But I don't stop loving the person. I don't believe that anybody is hopeless. I have a brother that was hopeless. He's in prison in Tennessee right now, but he's been sober for 2 years. And he got sober through the prison system because there's people out there like you that fought to get us into the prisons. Because 90%, and that's a conservative estimate, of the crimes that are committed that people are doing time for are alcohol and drug related. We got to be in the prisons. You know, it's the people that love enough to reach out and not be afraid to go into that prison and say, we need to get in here. We're needed here. And that for the first 2.5 years that I was sober, I did a meeting at the women's prison in Memphis. And for the first 6 months, I was in there giving a meeting to women that I knew from out when I was drinking and women that I'd gone through treatment with that had gone back out and had gotten arrested. And I watched one girl that I hated her guts when we were in treatment together. I mean, I absolutely hated her guts. And I watched her destroy herself with alcohol and drugs. And thought about how really selfish it was for me that I didn't like that girl because she was gorgeous. I mean, she was absolutely gorgeous, and it took her about 4 years to stop being gorgeous. And I may or may not have been able to change anything about what happened, but I also know what my responsibility is. My responsibility is to keep my own house in order, because you cannot transmit something that you have not got. I hope that I don't have to tell people what God's done for me. You know, I hope that I don't have to go around and let people know that that's not to say that I have any qualms about telling anybody that I'm an AA, because I don't. I don't get on television. I don't get on the radio. And I don't write books and sign my name and tell them that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because we have traditions that keep me from doing that. But I do tell anybody else out there, because you can only be just so anonymous, you know, that if you're that anonymous, nobody's going to know where you are. And how are they going to know to ask you for help? And that's what I'm here for, to be of maximum service to God. Through Alcoholics Anonymous, but through anything that I do. I walked in here at 21 years old. I weighed 72 pounds. I couldn't hardly, other than belligerent, put a whole paragraph together, you know, to put 3 sentences together. I wasn't able to read the big book because I couldn't retain anything that was going on in the big book, and I really thought, you know, I've destroyed every brain cell that I ever thought to have, and they don't come back. You know, they don't come back, and there's nothing else there. And Pat, for whatever reason, mainly because I would probably misread it, but also because I really wasn't much capable of doing it, read the big book to me. And that was also a guarantee that I would hear it. And then when I got to the point where I could read it and I would ask her a question, you know, she told me something when I had been sober for less than a year. She said, everything that you will ever need to know about any problem that you will ever have as long as you live, the answer is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, it doesn't say in there that, you know, I overate for a while. Okay, I mean, I was a pig. Okay, it doesn't say in there, if you were a pig, do this. Okay? It does talk in there about us wanting more of our share of things. And then maybe if I look at gluttony, I might figure out why I overeat. And I would ask her, yeah? You got an answer for this one? Where is it? And she says, in the book. And I said, where? And she said, find it. And I said, what page? She said, start on 1. And I did. You know, I mean, I was not a bright kid, okay? I did, and every time I thought, I know it's not on 1. You know, I didn't catch on to this first drink to get you drunk either. You know, I say, no, it's not. Hell, I can drink every man under the table, you know. So I came in with not much walking about sense, okay? And I had somebody in my life that believed enough in me and dedicated more to me as a sponsor than just saying, sure, I'll sponsor you, give me a call. Call me sometime. And that said that to 85 people, so that when you called, it was busy. Or when you needed to see them, they weren't there. What she did was she took sponsorship very seriously, and she took me through the steps. And she brought me back to life. And she talked to me about a little girl in white that's inside of me that I didn't know was there. And she nurtured that and literally brought me back to life through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and taking the time with me to do that. Totally selfless. And what's happened to me is that I went back to school. I went back about 8 years ago to college, to the most traumatic thing I'd ever done in my life. That was not college. That was registration. Okay? I thought, I'm not going to make it through this. You know, I can't be a college student. I can't even find my car on campus. And I suffered through doing those things, going home and saying, I can't do this, and praying to ask God to help me do it. And, you know, remembering the time that I sat in the very treatment center that I went through and was the secretary there, and it was my responsibility to pick up the phone to say, this is Grace House, may I help you? For the next girl that was calling in for help with alcohol. They didn't let me talk to her, because they wanted her to come in and get well. So let me transfer it to someone else. So it was my job to pick up the phone, and I couldn't even pick up the phone. I remember sitting there saying, while I was watching this light blink on the phone and hearing, like in a tunnel, hearing the sound of it ringing, and I couldn't pick it up because I was terrified. And I remember saying, God,
if you ever get me through these anxiety attacks to where I can function like a normal human being, I'll know that you're there. And the next time that I remember even thinking about that was 3 or 4 weeks later when I was doing 80 million things at one time, answering the phone, going out, looking for another job, going to work somewhere, not being able to find a job because I'm honest, because I was told to be honest, and when it asked on the application about, where have you been? I haven't been working. I told them. And they didn't want to hire me, and I know it's against the law not to hire somebody if they're an alcoholic, and I told them that I was an alcoholic, and I didn't get a lot of jobs because I did that, and I'm sure that's why I didn't get the jobs. But I'm also sure that the reason why I didn't is because I ended up in the place that I was supposed to end up to. I believe there's a song that we sing in the church that says, "Be not afraid, I go before you always." And I believe God really does go before me and fixes whatever it is that needs to be fixed, to take care of whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And all I have to do is be in tune to Him. So I ended up working for one of the lawyers I went to help me get out of jail that wouldn't take my case. He didn't recognize me. He hired me. He hired me on the spot. And I couldn't stand it anymore. After 3 days, I said, I got to go where I am. And he was like, I don't even recognize you. And the reason why he didn't recognize me is because it had been about 1.5 years, and I had changed. And between him and Pat, I did manage to get back into college, and I, at the risk of sounding like I'm bragging, because I am, worked my way through and put myself through college, and it took me 7.5 years to do it, but I graduated in May of 1987 with honors. Now, thank you. That's real impressive to me, because I remember also what it says in the 12 and 12 about any success today is more God's than our own. And I try to remember that all the time. I applied for law school that year at several different law schools because someone had suggested to me, as in my sponsor, because she took the time to realize that, there was more to getting sober than just saying, give me a call, that, I need to do something with my life, return me back to society, as a working member of society, like it says in the big book. And I applied to about 7 different law schools, and I didn't get accepted anywhere. And I got one rejection after another. And the first one was okay, the second one was okay, the third one's kind of tough, the fourth one, and as we worked our way down the line, I got, on my graduation day, my last rejection. I'm real grateful that Pat and Mike were in Arizona the day that I got it, and it didn't take me long to get through the self-pity. And remember that there's always a reason for all this, and God really does go before me. I ended up working for a guy for the year that I was out. I went to work for an attorney that was in the office where I'd been working, and he called me up and asked me to come to work for him, and he just happened to be in the area of law that I'm interested in, on the other side. Okay? He works in criminal defense, and I was just absolutely sure I wanted to be a prosecutor. He just also happened to be the former chief prosecutor of Maricopa County. He was also a former judge. And I worked for him for a year, and I probably learned more from him in 1 year than I was ever going to learn in 3 years of law school. And he's an AA. And we 12-stepped each other every single day. And we took each other's inventories. And we loved each other. And when I got accepted to law school this past year, he was sorry to see me go. I have not always left jobs that way. So it was really emotional saying goodbye. It just happened that I'm madly in love with Scottsdale, Arizona, and God wanted me in Denver, Colorado. And that's why I'm in Denver, because I'm in my 3rd week of law school. That I'm impressed with. I'm impressed with because I remember the time when I couldn't even read the big book. and to see how God really can restore us to sanity and put us on the path to do things with our lives. And to be able to give that to somebody else. To be able to give to the next woman that walks in because they don't sponsor men, because it does work. The next woman that walks in that door, to let her know it really does work. It really does work. Let me tell you where I've been. And let me tell you how much I love you. And let me tell you that you really don't ever have to drink again. You really don't ever have to pick up another drink as long as you live. And that's why I say my sobriety date. And my sobriety date is March 27th, 1979, and I haven't had a drink since I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought I had to slip to be a good AA member. And I'm real glad it was cleared up for me that you don't have to drink again to be a good alcoholic. You already paid your dues. You don't have to go back out there. You don't have to drink again. Every once in a while, God sends somebody to us that are really especially neat to have in your life. You know, I think everybody in my life is neat, and I probably shouldn't, forgive me, Lord, say that there's somebody that I place above somebody else, but I guess there is, and it's somebody that I'm sponsoring who happens to be with me tonight that has in the last year changed me so much in my sponsoring her and taught me so much about love when I thought that all the time I was given to her, when what it really is that we're given to each other. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. I moved away from her about a month and a half ago up to Denver, and it was really difficult. A lot I could say goodbye to, but one thing I had a really hard time saying goodbye to was her. And she's moving to Denver next week. Because that's where God wants her to be. And that's how it works. I wish that y'all could see you like I see you up here. I think I've been given a talent, and I can speak in front of a group of people without being terrified. And I've been given that from God. And I can say that today because to not say it is denying that God works in my life. I'm so grateful to be here. I am so gratified that I was even asked to attend it, let alone to share, and that the committee was kind enough to let me bring Mary with me, to share in this with me, and to introduce her to your grand sponsor, because that's how it works. You pass it on. I love all of y'all. Thanks a lot.